One of the scariest things that can happen to a loved one is to find out that they've disappeared. But what's even scarier is to discover that someone has actually taken them. A staggering amount of people go missing every year, taken and held captive by a deranged individual. The following stories are about to make you uneasy because you will realize that it could happen to you. Here are 10 missing people found under creepy circumstances. Number 10 is Steven Stainer. During 1972, a 7-year-old Californian boy named Steven Stainer was abducted. At the time, he was on his way home after school. A predator named Kenneth Parnell snatched young Steven before he could reach the safety of his family home. He drove the boy 322 kilometers to a remote cabin where Parnell was living at the time. After harming Steven for 8 years in 1980, Parnell decided to snatch another young boy. This time it was 5-year-old Timothy White. Steven was so horrified by this, not wanting such a young child to go through what he had, he managed to escape Parnell's clutches, taking Timothy White with him. They managed to finally reach a police station. 8 years after Steven Stainer had been abducted and presumed dead, he was finally reunited with his family as a hero. Number 9 is Timothy Carney. On September 20th, 2004, Timothy Carney was last seen by his roommate in the apartment that they shared. After that, Timothy disappeared without a trace. At first, police and other investigators suspected that foul play was a possibility. His family were understandably grief-stricken by Timothy's disappearance. However, in 2011, almost 7 years to the day since he had vanished, he was found alive and well. It appears that Timothy had joined a cult who had encouraged him to cut all ties with his past life. Because of privacy laws, the police were not allowed to make his whereabouts public, nor even let his family know exactly where he was unless Timothy agreed. Unfortunately, he did not. All that they could say was that they had found him, verified that he was alive, and that he was, physically at least, still healthy. Number 8 is Nguyen Thi Van. 16-year-old Nguyen Thi Van lived in Vietnam. In 1992, she arrived home late one day. Her mother decided to punish her and lock her outside. Angry, Nguyen did not wait around. She decided to go out with some friends and spent some time at a karaoke bar. At some point during the night, she encountered a woman who managed to trick Nguyen and her friends into accompanying her to a different location. There, the girls discovered the horrible truth. They had, in fact, been abducted. Soon after, they discovered that they were to become slaves. They were transported against their will to China. There, the girls were forced to marry men aged between 70 and 80 years old. Nguyen lived in this state of slavery for 21 years until she finally escaped and made it back to her mother. Number 7 is Gabriel Nagi. In January of 1987, Gabriel Nagi vanished without a trace. He phoned his wife to let her know that he would be coming home for lunch, but he never appeared. His wife and 2 children became anxious about his safety. The very next day, Gabriel's car was found burnt on the side of a road with no sign of a body. More than 20 years passed before anyone found out what had happened to Gabriel. As it turns out, he had suffered a terrible head injury in a car crash and wandered away, leaving his memories behind. He had no knowledge of who he was until he was contacted by a police officer who believed him to be a missing person. Gabriel was eventually reunited with his family, though many of his memories remain to this day a blur. Number 6 is Sean Hornbeck. Sean Hornbeck disappeared on October 6, 2002. He had been riding his bike at the time near his home in Richwoods, Missouri. He was abducted by a man named Michael Devlin, who tied him up at his apartment and threatened Sean that if he tried to escape or even tell anyone, Devlin would harm Sean's family. It wasn't until 5 years later that Sean was finally found. The FBI approached Michael Devlin's apartment to serve an unrelated arrest warrant. However, when they saw a white pickup truck outside the apartment building, which matched a vehicle associated with another recent kidnapping, they broke into his apartment. The agents and police officers were shocked to find Sean held prisoner there, along with Devlin's most recent hostage. The police soon learned that Devlin had passed Sean off as his son. Number 5 are the Ariel Castro kidnappings. Between 2002 and 2004, Ariel Castro kidnapped 3 young women and held them captive in his Cleveland, Ohio home. The 3 young women were Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Georgina De Jesus. They lived as prisoners in Castro's house until May of 2013. One of the women, Amanda Berry, managed to get to a bolted door which led outside with her 6-year-old daughter, who was also Castro's, though he had encouraged the child to call Amanda grandmother instead of mother. When a neighbor heard Amanda Berry's screams for help, he bashed a hole in the door and Amanda fled. The police were then alerted to both Michelle and Georgina's whereabouts, where they were rescued. Ariel Castro was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. He subsequently took his own life. Number 4 is Carolina White. Carolina White was a 23-year-old woman from Atlanta. She'd had a normal upbringing, but there was something about her family which seemed off to her. Something just didn't add up about her birth. When Carolina was a teenager, she fell pregnant and asked her mother for her own birth certificate for her records. When her mother couldn't produce one, she told Carolina that she had bought her from a drug addict when she was a baby. However, this still didn't ring true. After some research into missing children, Carolina realized that she had been abducted. A DNA test confirmed that she had been snatched from a hospital by her fake mother, who had dressed up as a nurse and walked out of the hospital with her. The kidnapper spent 12 years in prison, and Carolina was finally reunited with her biological family 23 years after being taken. Number 3 is Tanya Ketch. Tanya Ketch was born in 1981 in Pennsylvania. Just 15 years later, she was abducted and held captive for 10 years. Tanya had been manipulated into thinking that she was running towards a new life. A security guard named Thomas Hose had befriended her. He began an inappropriate relationship with her, taking her out and encouraging her to run away with him so that they could be together. In February of 1996, Thomas Hose used his age and manipulative ways to finally get what he wanted. But it was far from what Tanya had imagined. She was confined to a bedroom and had to use a bucket to go to the toilet. 6 years later, he had brainwashed her enough that he would let her leave the house occasionally. Back in the outside world and realizing the relationship was twisted, Tanya fled and finally put Thomas Hose behind bars. Number 2 is Marina Chapman. In 1954, at the tender age of just 4 years old, Marina Chapman was taken from her Colombian village. No one is certain why she was taken or by who. Not even Marina was sure, although she suspects that her kidnappers had intended to use her for ransom. But for some reason, instead of killing her, Marina's kidnappers released her into the jungle. Marina survived in the jungle for the next 10 years until she was finally found by hunters. The only reason Marina survived in such a harsh environment was that a troop of capuchin monkeys had adopted her. They taught her how to catch animals with her hands, and after that she was able to feed herself. Her incredible story remains a potent reminder that human beings are capable of surviving even in the most difficult circumstances. And number 1 is Elizabeth Fritzl. On August 28, 1984, Austrian Josef Fritzl asked his daughter Elizabeth to go down into the basement to help him carry a door. The bitter irony is that the door was the last piece of a prison room that Josef had built to keep the 18-year-old Elizabeth captive. For the next 24 years, Josef Fritzl had 7 children with his daughter. 1 died and another 3 were allowed to live upstairs in the house with Josef and Elizabeth's mother, who was unaware of Joseph's hidden room. Elizabeth's mother believed her daughter had had the children and then abandoned them. Elizabeth kept 3 of her children in the dungeon her father had built. But in April of 2008, Elizabeth was allowed to accompany 1 child to the hospital. The Fritzl secret unraveled from there, and Elizabeth and her children were finally freed from the brutality of her father.